Hello students, we're going to look at the results from the Diffusion Mastery Lab so that if you missed class or you just want to see it in another way, or if you're on Zoom, you have an opportunity to do so. So the first clip we're going to see here, or images from 10 seconds in, we can see the warm water on the far right has mostly diffused already. The cold water's done a little bit, the room temp a little bit more, and the salt is still sitting on top. So that's right after the drop was placed in each of those. The next one we're going to see is after a minute. And after a minute, kind of the same thing. The warm water is pretty much spread out. So we already know that one's the fastest. The room temperature a little bit more, the cold a little bit less, and the salt's still stuck on top. So we kind of have our ranking figured out already. After 2 minutes, again, pretty similar. We can see the wisps moving through the room temperature one, and the salt one still sitting on top because the salt water is more dense. After 3 minutes, we can see that the warm water is pretty much fully diffused, and the other three are kind of the same still. Things get a little bit more interesting when we hit around 4 minutes. You can see some of the stuff is starting, some of the dye is starting to move down through the salt water, while the cold and room temp are still kind of in their rankings, right? The room temperature is a little bit further along than the cold. And then we can see at 5 minutes that more of the wisps are moving down from the salt, and the room temperature spread out quite a bit, and the cold a little bit more. The warm water is pretty much evenly spread throughout. After 10 minutes, I think we have the best look. Room temperature, quite a bit spread out. Cold, mostly stuck at the bottom still. Salt, starting to really get pulled down. The salt has a big advantage because the dye is on top. Gravity can help the diffusion. It's pulling the dye down through the salt, so that helps. But the warm water, far out ahead, definitely the fastest. Okay, a couple more pictures to go. I took a couple extra pictures, so after 15 minutes, the salt water actually will pass at some point because you can see that the dye is being pulled down. And then after 30 minutes, the salt water is actually pretty much done. The cold water is doing okay. And I have a couple guesses about the room temperature water getting stuck. I think because I pulled that from the tap and there were still some air bubbles that slowed down the diffusion. But your rankings probably from warm water fastest, and then cold and salt water the slowest from what you saw in class. Thanks for watching.